people think of Gundagai, this guy gets all the attention. But there's so much more than a dog on a Tuckerbox. I'm Madeleine, and this is the Cellar Door, Australia. Of all the country towns in Australia, few are as well known as Gundagai. Perhaps more than any other historical Aussie town, Gundagai has become an icon for country Australia, immortalised in the work of poets and songwriters. Roughly halfway between Melbourne and Sydney, the town was the de facto pit stop along the old Hume Highway, but has recently established itself as much more than a through town for motorists driving between the two capitals. It's home to one of the newest wine regions, and today I'll see why its versatile climate is forging a reputation amongst the heavy hitters of Australian wine regions. Established in 1998, Tumblong Hills, some 20 minutes west of Gundagai along the Murrumbidgee River, was at the forefront of the region's establishment. I'm meeting Simon over a Shiraz up on the Vineyard to find out what's so special about the area. Initially a contractor when the winery was established back in 1998 by Penfolds, Simon later went all in and bought the vineyard when it came up for tender.
I grew up on a vineyard. My father was the first guy to grow grapes and make wine in southwest New South Wales, and he established his vineyard and winery in 1968. I sort of gravitated into biodynamic agriculture, and for the last 20 years that's been my thought process. And you get good structure in your fruit, which gives you good structure in your wine. That basically means you're going to produce a product that is easy to drink.
It also gives your consumers good times.
You know, you don't have to say, oh, well, let's leave it for a few years before we drink it. But, you know, it's good when it's young, it's good when it's old.
Simon was no novice in the wine game. Growing up in the hilltops of New South Wales, his family pioneered winemaking in the region.
My father planted his vineyard when I was 9, so, you know, he was a sheep farmer and a grain farmer. In 1968 there was a drought and they had to get rid of all their sheep, so he said, okay, I'm going to plant grapes. And then when he got his first crop there was a fruit fly outbreak and they weren't able to sell the fruit to Griffiths, so he said, okay, fine. So he went into town and bought a book, so how to make wine, and that's how he started.
Amazing.
And in those days, Barwang was the only cellar door vineyard between Rutherglen and Mudgee.
Wow.
So there were no others, and he's responsible for that. You know, when he established his vineyard, he lost friends.
Wow.
Because they couldn't believe that this guy was growing grapes in the middle of nowhere.
A few decades later, Simon found a unique opportunity when the winery he worked on came up for sale.
We did all the contract work for training, pruning, so I've been associated with this vineyard since 1998. It's pretty much the same. We've just made a fair few changes in varieties and that sort of thing in the last 10 years. So we've converted large areas of Shiraz into different Italian varieties like Nebbiolo, Fiano, Sangiovese. Originally there was Nebbiolo and Sangiovese here, which was quite a progressive thing back then because those Italian varieties only really just started to come into vogue a little bit. So we have had the luxury of having those Italian varieties right from the beginning, so we've learned a lot about them. I thought this climate here was a bit more on the warmer side, but over the last 10 years it's become pretty obvious that it's actually not that warm just because of its proximity to the mountains. So you get what we call katabatic winds, which basically means that the day and nighttime temperature is cold at night, warm at day. So they call that the diurnal, and you get a ripening process that gives you a medium-bodied wine as opposed to a full-bodied wine. So they achieve tannin ripeness at a lower Beaumont, whereas so in the Barossa or those other places, they tend to be a little bit higher. So we're very suited to producing medium-bodied wines, which at the moment is very popular in the marketplace. So that's a big plus for us. And this Shiraz is made from 2 clones. There's 1127, which is a Barossa clone, and there's the best Great Western clone, which comes from Great Western in Victoria. So you've got a cool climate clone, one's a warm climate clone. So, and they blend very well together. We're still learning about it. The different array of clones that we have here, because it was planted by Penfolds, there's 7 or 8 different Shiraz clones, so we can pick and choose which clones we want. We do end up making a very good Shiraz, obviously, because that is what their focus was. So we have the luxury of their knowledge, and now we have the luxury of understanding the soil a bit better and what wine works for us.
Along with the climate, the region's soil has proved perfect for growing grapes.
It's volcanic soil, and it's what it is. It's part of an old lava flow called the Kara Trough. We dug a lot of holes, like pits. You dig pits to have a look at what the soil structure is and to see if there's any physical barriers so that the vine roots can go down without having any interference. So we dug all these pits, and the geologist told me that this was part of what they call the Kara Trough that came down from Mount Canobolas. And I mean, that's quite unique. There's not that many vineyards around that are planted on ironstone in Australia. And it just gives you a lovely soil structure and depth of soil. We've improved on that soil structure just through our growing philosophy and the way that I like to go about growing grapes for making wine. Over the last 10 years, we've never ever used any fertiliser on this vineyard, which is, a little bit unusual, but we're able to get a bit of balance with that soil structure that comes from the lava flow. At the end of the day, that's what gives you good fruit, which gives you good wine.
Before we head to the cellar door, Simon's showing me around the vineyard.
Can you tell me about how you manage the vines?
We don't use any chemicals or herbicides, so you have to have a combination of cultivation and mowing. So in the late winter, early spring, we would cultivate, and then we would leave that, and then everything will grow up. So you get lots of pioneer plants coming, which are taprooted plants, which goes down into the soil, which improves your soil structure. And then we will go in with a mower and mow underneath. And so the third process is where we come through with a slasher, and what we do is called fluffing. So the slasher slashes, and then it throws all the grass cuttings out here under the vines. So you get this, there's all this here. Yeah. So in a vineyard that uses chemicals, this, that's just bare dirt.
Yeah.
So there's no...
Exposed to the elements
well,
as well.
Everything's exposed
right?
to the elements, and there's no regenerational activity happening. I mean, this is why I do it.
Yeah.
This is the best part of it, and this is what gives you good wine quality. You get good soil structure, you get good cell structure, you get good wine structure. To be able to do this, to put back into the soil, and for it to show in the wine, I mean, that's why we keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that is a privilege.
Yeah.
I think it's time to experience a few more fruits of labour. So, down at the cellar door, Simon's showing me some of the Italian varieties enjoying popularity on the market.
So Simon, what are we drinking first up?
We're going to try a Fiano, which is a southern Italian variety. Very, very old variety. The Romans made wine out of Fiano. This was 100% red vineyard when it was planted, so we've been grafting Shiraz over to other varieties. And coming from southern Italy, it is sort of suited to a slightly warmer climate, so it seems to work really well. So it's got like a gingery character on the nose.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is pretty much common with the variety. When you drink it, you'll see that acidity.
Oh, it's really nice. I've definitely got that acidity, but that first sip, the first flavours at the front of your mouth is really...
Yeah, and it's got a, I don't know whether you eat pears or not, but there's the texture of pears in there, which sort of works really well with the acidity. You know, it's not like apple, which is quite sharp, but pears are a little bit softer, so it has that softer palate. And 2023, we had a little bit of exposure in the canopy, so there's a little bit of phenolics in there, but I was sort of looking for that phenolics in there so that there was a bit of a definition between the Fiano and the Chenin Blanc, which is another white variety that we grow. So I didn't want them both to be too similar. So with that a little bit of exposure, we got a little bit more phenolics, which comes through on the palate.
It's very drinkable and very nice and refreshing.
It is, you know, it's been around since the Romans, so it stood the test of time.
Yeah.
At the moment, people are sort of gravitating away from the traditional varieties, even though Chardonnay is becoming more popular at the moment. But I think the thing about these Italian varieties that they do have a little bit more texture, which is probably makes them open to a broader market.
Enjoying it.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm in one of the newest wine regions in New South Wales, based around the town of Gundagai. Just west of Tumblong Hills, away from the snowy mountain foothills and towards the fertile plains of the Murrumbidgee, is Borambola Wines, another pioneer of the Gundagai wine region. I'm catching up with Tim, who began planting Chardonnay at the historic Borambola homestead, over a glass of Shiraz, of course.
Initially, we've seen those traditional Shiraz, Cabernet, Chardonnay, but in recent times we've seen those more of the European varietals like Tempranillo, Sangiovese, Touriga, these sort of varietals which are perfect for our warm growing region here. We've got a little bit of altitude here, beautiful big rolling hills for drainage, and then access to a lot of water with the Murrumbidgee flowing right through the middle of our wine growing area.
Now you've supplied me with a very delicious drink here.
Yes.
Very nice wine. Can you tell me about what we're sipping on?
Yeah, this is our 22 Shiraz, and the Shiraz in this area, it's a little bit of a blend of both the Canberra region and say the Hilltops region. So we get those lovely white pepper coming through, a little bit of spice, and quite intense berry characteristics as well.
The Borambola homestead has a rich history. Built in the early 1880s, it was the centre of a huge pastoral empire and even paid host to King Edward VIII when he visited Australia in 1920.
My parents purchased the property. We knew that they were buying an old homestead. Didn't know a lot about the history. With the wine we're drinking now, it's called Haraji Spell. Haraji was the 1947 Melbourne Cup. He was trained at the property, and after winning that race, spell back into now our Shiraz paddock. And the original homestead built in 1840. Attacked by Captain Moonlight in 1879, and still bears the scars of where that shootout occurred in 1879.
It's incredible, just that history is all alive, and also, the nod to it in all of your wines.
Yes, yeah, no, it's a great experience, I think, for the people who are visiting our Cellar Door. Not only get the experience of the wines that we produce in our area, but then being 100% estate grown. But we then intertwine that with the beautiful, rich history that the property has.
While it was a busy hub for sheep grazing and wheat farming, today it operates as a cellar door, hosting weddings and functions, and offers visitors a glimpse at traditional Australian architecture, all over some estate wine, of course.
For me, it's really just to get the best out of our vineyard. So we throw everything at it. So we hand prune our 16,500 vines. We hand pick all of our grapes for our own wine. We press these out for quite a few months just to try and get that really big depth of colour. And then with the barrels, we use French oak barriques, which are the 225 litre barrels. And we buy different barrels that have different toastings and tightness of wood. allows the wine to interact with the wood and vice versa with its time in barrel. And when you're estate grown, you try to get those complexities into your wine, and that's one way of doing it for us.
Definitely. Yeah, well, all that hard work has definitely paid off because this is delicious.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Back at Tumblong, it's time for another taste of Italy.
So this one is Chenin Blanc, which comes from the Loire Valley in France. We've been very, very, very successful with this Chenin Blanc. This wine has actually won 4 trophies. I'm bragging now. So.
No, please brag away.
But it's worked really well, the Chenin Blanc. So Chenin Blanc originates from the Loire Valley in France, which is the same place that Sauvignon Blanc comes from. So they call the Sauvignon Blanc a Sancerre, and they call the Chenin Blanc a Vouvray. But they're different styles, different varieties, but they do, they originated in the Loire Valley in France. And they're different. A Sancerre tends to be a little bit more bolder, whereas the Vouvrays are quite lineal, is probably the best way to describe it. But I'm not an expert on Sauvignon Blanc, but that's what I'd say. I'd say that the Vouvrays are quite lineal, meaning that they've got a really straight line.
Yeah.
The Fiona's got a little bit more phenolics in it, whereas the Chenin Blanc has a little bit more of those, rather than pear characters, has like green apple characters.
Yeah.
And if you taste it, you'll sort of pick up on that as well.
It's delicious.
But it's got a lovely palate. It fills out,
Yeah.
and it's got really nice length. And on the length, you pick up that green apple, like Granny Smith character. It's got beautiful length, that wine.
Yeah, it's nice.
Which is why it's been so successful in all the shows.
Yeah. So this is what you were hoping for when
Was
you envisioned it?
to win 4 trophies.
Yeah.
I mean, whoa.
Maybe.
I mean, I've been in the wine industry for a long time, and it's actually the first trophy that I've ever won, and it was like, that's a little bit emotional. That goes back a few years. So there was a lot of satisfaction in this wine, but it seems to be able to deliver every year, which is, we've got a 23 that we've just started selling, and it's as good as this wine is too.
Yeah, it's really clean too. It's
very clean. And some of the wine show judges say to me, they say, "What did you do to that wine? How did you do that?"
Yeah.
I said, "We did nothing. Basically, we fermented it, left it on light lees for 6 months, and then put it in a bottle. There's no oak in that wine." And for a wine like that to be so successful on the wine show circuit is pretty good.
Yeah, it's
Because
trailblazing.
You can try and be very complex and all that sort of stuff, but this is a really straightforward, simple wine, and sticking to the ethos. Easy to drink, easy to sell.
I'm in Gundagai, the centre for one of New South Wales' newest wine regions. But there's a lot more on offer than delicious wine.
When most people think of Gundagai, they think the iconic dog on a Tuckerbox or being halfway between Melbourne and Sydney as a stopping point, but what else does it have to offer?
So Gundagai has a great historic background, and there's so much to see in terms of visiting the jail or the museum. We're lucky enough to have the Murrumbidgee River running through Gundagai, so people can walk down there and experience the beauty of the river. We're also the gateway to a number of other regions such as the Snowy Valleys and Hilltops.
Not to mention, Gundagai is home to the oldest Greek cafe in Australia, the Niagara Cafe, now lovingly restored to its former glory. While the streets are lined with charming buildings and local history, Gundagai is also host to a range of events throughout the year. And there's one not to be missed for any fan of country and western, the Battle on the Bidgie. Shane's dropping by to tell why it's a must.
Shane, can you tell me, what is the Battle on the Bidgie?
Mate, the Battle on the Bidgie's, it's a stockman's challenge. Obviously all on horseback, but basically originates from what the stockmen and women used to do on a daily basis years ago. We've got open categories right down through our ladies sections, our junior sections, and right down into our little tackers, our little striplings on their ponies. preliminary events, we've got a whip crack section. So you navigate a course, hitting whip targets with your stock whip, both sides of the horse. Bareback obstacle course, which is the same horse but no saddle. So you've got your horseshoeing section, where competitors have got to put front and back shoe on a horse in a set time limit. So all these events are on the clock. So yeah, it's a stockman's challenge, and it's great.
Wow.
It's a heap of fun.
It sounds like there's so much to see and do.
Yeah.
How many competitors do you attract annually?
We run our event over 3 days, so we're jammed for time. We're the biggest competitor-based challenge in Australia. We take 80 in our main challenge, which is our open competitors, our ladies, and then our juniors. But on top of that, we say no to no stripling. So your little tackers are, I'll get this wrong, but I'm going to try 9 to 14 years of age. So we've really got the little future of the sports coming through and having a go. I think we've topped out at 60 or 70 stripling competitors alone, with 80 in our main card. So we're looking at 140 competitors at the Gundagai Showground there over 4 days, which is great for the town.
Yeah.
It really is great for the town.
And they can come out and experience the region as well in between their training sessions.
Absolutely, there's a fair bit to see. We're pretty lucky to live where we live. It's great for the town, and it's, you know, everyone loves an event like that because there's not many of them in Australia, and you get to see stuff that you don't see anywhere else.
And I hope that it's also fueled by some of these delicious wines from the region. Is there some wines on offer?
There's plenty to eat and drink down
okay,
there,
good.
and it's quite the party.
Love
But no, certainly the locals all get behind us, and it's great. Yeah.
Nice.
And again, I just want to thank all the local community at Gundagai for helping us out every year. It's been great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the wine. Simon's got one last drop ready for me to see out the day.
And what do you have for me here?
So what we've got here is a Tumblong Hills Table of Plenty Sangiovese 2022. So Sangiovese was part of the original planting here, which was at that time quite progressive to plant Sangiovese in the 90s. You know, there was very, very little Sangiovese in Australia in the 90s. So it's the original clonal material that was brought into Australia.
Wow. So this is really a glass of Australian wine history in a way.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
No, as far as Sangiovese,
Yeah.
in 1998 there would have probably only been 60, 70 hectares of Sangiovese in Australia. I'm guessing, but I don't think it would have been much more than that.
Yeah, wow.
Traditionally, it's from Tuscany in Italy, and it's the grape variety used that they make Chianti from, which is that lighter style red wine that has a little bit of a bite to it, because the tannins in Sangiovese are quite angular and they're very mouth-filling. So when you try this, you'll see that. So you have to be very careful when you pick this to make sure that the tannins have sort of rounded off a little bit, otherwise it can be a little bit
Too jarring.
yeah, or too mouth-filling. So it's that lighter style. You get quite a lot of flavour from a wine that's quite light. And that, I like that about this variety. I like that about this. And this clone is very, very traditional in what it produces. Some of the newer clones they're bringing in are a little bit rounder and sort of going a bit more to softer sort of tannins, but I quite like these ones because they've got a little bit of sharpness to them.
Yeah.
Which means that you can drink it chilled.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons why it makes such a good rosé as well, because it has that slight texture that gives the impression of being quite dry.
Yeah.
So it works well. Again, this is a people's clone. The clones that you can get now are called MAC clones, and they're patented clones, so you actually have to pay to use them, whereas this one is free for everybody to use.
Yeah.
And I do prefer this clone.
It's light but so flavoursome.
Got a lot of flavour, yeah. And that is what a good Chianti is. Light, but with good flavour.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Simon. I know we're not in Tuscany, but this isn't too bad. Cheers.
Thank you.